looking back, I realized why I struggled so much in architecture school, and the lack of preparation was one of them. I realized how I could have prepared better, and so this video, I'm going to be sharing with you how you can find out if the industry is right for you before starting architecture school, how to prepare your portfolio for the application process, what softwares you need, equipment and supplies, and what skills you should be building now for architecture school and your finances. Let's get started. Is the industry right for you? Now, this is a great question to ask prior to starting architecture school. And something that you got to keep in mind that architecture is a long marathon and it's a huge commitment, right? You're committing financially, you're committing your time to this. So you want to make sure that you're going into the field and you're actually interested in it. And so one of the best ways to do that is to do a summer course. Many of the universities that offer these accredited programs in architecture, the undergrad and the master's in architecture, offer summer courses for people interested in getting into architecture. And the added bonus of these summer courses is that you're going to be building your portfolio that you can use for your application process when you're applying to these programs. And you're also getting to know the school and the program. And so you're getting a feel if you actually like that program and you could imagine yourself completing that course. So this is a great way to get a feel for the industry and a feel for that school or program that you're planning to take. Now, this was not available during my time. And so I wish I had this because I would totally take advantage of summer courses. So as part of your application into school, you need to have a portfolio. And for that portfolio, you need to have samples of your work, and they're all a representation of your creativity. So you're gonna have sketches, you may have photography, you may have photos of some of the work you've done in building models or building products. And so you would showcase your talent and your skills within that portfolio. And so in order to build that portfolio, you can do one of a few things. You can get enrolled in one of those summer courses through the universities that offer the architecture programs, and they will actually give you different exercises to build that portfolio, and they will also kind of provide some tips on how to put together an effective portfolio. You can also, if you are currently in high school, make sure to take your visual art courses, make sure to take photography courses. Now, of course, you have to be interested in that too, but if you're into photography, visual arts, carpentry, anything within the creative field, animation, 3D, modeling, and so on, I would take advantage of those courses because with the projects that you generate from those courses, you can place them in your portfolio, and that will help you to build that application for architecture school. Now, if you're not in high school, but you've done paintings or you've done other things, photography and different creative works, you can include that as well. And perhaps you need a bit of a push. There's different college courses that you can take to help you provide different prompts of exercises and different projects that you can get started to get creative and to start building that portfolio. So I would fully take advantage of that. Now that you've gone through the application process and you've been accepted to a program, I would start to look into how you can start to understand that program so you can start to build some preparation and a plan of action. So start to understand what the program is about. Now, typically the program will provide a curriculum and what the studio courses are going to be about, some of the courses within the program they're going to be doing, structures, components, services, different things. And so I would look at those and start to pay attention to the studio work as well. Do you need to do drafting? Is there going to be more digital work? So try to understand what the program is about so that you can start to prepare better for the program. So once you understand the program, now you can start building some skills in preparation for architecture school. And one of those skills that I'd really take some time to start to think about and to be very mindful is your time management. Time management is so important once you start getting into architecture school. Start to think about your workflow, start to think of systems and ways to organize yourself once you get started in the program, and really start to build that system so that you can be effective and productive while you're enrolled in the program. So what that could mean is try to get your books in order, start to get your computer in order, get all those things organized so that you have that system started so you can just hit the ground running once you start architecture school. Software skills. Now, I wouldn't dive in too deep into this because a lot of this will come into practice while you're in architecture school with practice and experience with doing the projects. However, I wish I took some time to get to know the interface of the programs, and I spent some time playing around with the programs because I was just cold turkey in the programs. I had no idea what any of them were, and so I wish I knew a little bit about them so that would have saved me so much time. And with YouTube, you can get a lot of tutorials just to get you into the programs. And so I would really recommend beginning to getting to know these programs, installing them in your system, and getting everything going. And so what programs would I recommend? I would first remember that you need to understand the program. I remember when I started in architecture school, the first 2 years was all drafting, and only the 2 last years of the 4-year program of my undergrad were actually digital. In that specific program, SketchUp was banned from the program, and so they did not like SketchUp. So it would have been useless me spending the time learning that 3D software, although SketchUp is very simple. That is something important to keep in mind to understand what your program is known for, but it doesn't hurt to know that program because when you do graduate, a lot of practices might use that program. And so these are the softwares that I would recommend. I would first get to know the Adobe Creative Suite, especially Illustrator, InDesign, and Photoshop. Those 3 are like your bread and butter. You need them to edit photos. The InDesign is going to help you to put together presentation documents, and you need Illustrator to create illustrations, diagrams, and so on. So start to get to know the interface and how that works. Then in terms of 3D programs, now there's a wide range, but the ones that I would recommend to get to know is Rhino, and I would get to know SketchUp. Although some programs do ban it, I would still get to know it because a lot of practices do use SketchUp. Now, Revit is a little advanced. I would not spend time getting to know Revit. That's something that your program will help you with that, but do get to know Rhino and SketchUp. Just dive into it, just play around with it, get to know the interface, and there's a lot of plugins as well. You could get started with those, but just getting to know the interface and playing around with it will make you a little comfortable with it, and it'll save you time once you get started in the program. And the other program I would learn is AutoCAD. Now, again, you don't need to be proficient at this before starting architecture school, but it helps to get to know the program, the interface, watch a few tutorials of people using the program, and download it, and just get started with the program and just learn a little bit of it so that when you start architecture school, you have a little bit of information and a bit of a foundation to start with rather than knowing nothing. So start with those, and those are kind of the preliminary programs. There's a lot more, but I would start with those, and then in architecture school, you'll become more proficient at the programs and you'll learn more about it. Supplies and equipment. Now, this does depend on your program and the school that you're going to because every program is slightly different, but one thing remains constant across the board on all programs is you need a computer. And I would recommend a laptop just because it's more versatile. You can bring it with you to studio, you can bring it home with you, and you have your full workstation there. You have all your programs and everything, and you can work on the go. And if you could get a PC, a desktop, that would be great too. I did that. I got a laptop, and then eventually I got a PC as well. So having both is great, but if you can't, a laptop would be best. And the other thing, the benefit of having the laptop is you don't always have to constantly print out your floor plans or your work because you have it on your computer and you can have desk crits with your teacher or your professor. So that's definitely something that you're gonna need for sure. And you gotta make sure that whatever laptop you get, it needs to be able to run all the software that we just talked about because you are going to be rendering, you are going to be doing 3D modeling, and typically you want to aim for a very powerful computer, so more of a gamer type laptop to run all those programs. Now, depending on the program, you may need drafting supplies. Most likely you will. Some programs are really heavily, first few years is basically drafting by hand, and so you'll need a lot lot more tools to do that. Now, I'm guessing that most programs do have a bit of drafting nowadays. I don't know how it is nowadays, but during my time, the first 2 years, we did heavy drafting. No computer work was allowed. And so I remember if I made a mistake on that plan, I had to redraft the entire thing by hand. Wow, it was crazy. And then I had to render it with pastels and so on. And so if you make a mistake, you got to redo the whole thing. It was a lot of work, but it does build that foundation and it does build that craftsmanship that you get from those foundation years of doing everything by hand and then getting into the digital. So depending on the program, you may have a lot of drafting, and so you will need quite a few supplies for that, or you may just be able to get away with a few drafting supplies since it's not really heavily on drafting. The other thing you'll need too is modeling supplies. And I think this would be across the board on all programs nowadays, is you got to build physical models. And to do that, you're going to need some X-Acto knives, some rulers, and different supplies that will help you to build those models. And again, I would wait more toward when you're in the program to get those supplies so that you really understand what you need and you can slowly purchase those supplies. You don't have to purchase everything all at once. You definitely need that computer and the programs. I would get that going first. And then these supplies you can kind of get as you're in the program. And the same with books. There's going to be a list typically that the program will give you of all the books you're going to need for that first year. And honestly, you don't need all of them. You can get away with just a few books. So you don't need all the books on that list. So I would recommend holding off on getting the books and just feeling out the program and seeing what exactly finances. Now, you need to make sure that you have a bit of a cushion and savings in place for your living expenses and your supplies. The other thing that I did not really think about, because I really wasn't aware of this, but when you're in architecture school, you not only have all these modeling supplies, so you got to buy wood, paper, all sorts of things to build these physical models, but you got to do pin-ups. And for those pin-ups, you're going to have to display your work on the wall. And you have to print your floor plans, your renderings, and so on. And let me tell you, that costs a lot of money. I remember spending hundreds of dollars printing my work to put it on display for those final projects. Or even for the desk crits, sometimes you do want to see how your floor plans look on paper prior to that final project. So there's all those hidden costs. So it's important to have your savings and your finances in order so that you're able to keep up with those finances and all those hidden costs as well. Housing is really important because this is something that I made a huge mistake on when I was going to architecture school, is that I lived more than an hour away from the architecture building and I had to commute by bus, by streetcar, by subway, and there was like 3 or 4 transfers that I had to do. It's exhausting and I was constantly sleeping on the bus. It was not good, not safe, and honestly, it's just not worth it either because that's gonna take away from your work and being effective and productive in your studio work and what counts. So I would make sure you're not more than 30 minutes away by bus, by transit, by car from the architecture building so that you can save that time for things that are more important, like really focusing on your studies and saving that energy where it's needed, or sleeping. You do not have to live on campus. I never lived on campus. It's way too expensive, but there's ways to look for housing that's close by within the radius of the school that you can find that is actually quite cost effective. So just spend some time on the housing portion because it's very important. Taking advice from others. Now, when I started going into architecture school, or prior to getting into architecture school, I was actually advised not to go into architecture because it's kind of a thankless job in a way. There's a lot of hours that go into it. It's very time-consuming, intense. And yes, that's true, but I'm glad I didn't listen to that person because it is something I truly love to do. And if I had listened to them, I wouldn't have gone through it. And yes, I did struggle through architecture school and it was a hard time, but I had such a blast while doing it too. I don't want you just to see the struggle and the hard work that's involved in architecture school, but also it's a lot of fun in the process. And it is probably one of the best times in your life when you're in architecture school. It's very interesting. It's the worst, but also the best time of your life. Yes, it's hard, But for me, I had so much fun. So as long as you love it and you enjoy architecture, you will have a great time. So just be careful with the advice that you hear from others and even from myself. I mean, this is my experience and I loved it, but it is good to get a feel for it yourself and to experience it yourself so that you can then make that choice for yourself. If you want more information about my experience at UBC, I would recommend this video here. And if you'd like to subscribe and support the channel, you can do that here. I'll see you on the next video. Until then, bye!